When you open new software, it's often hard to get started with it. SolidWorks is the very same. Now, it doesn't make a difference if you have SolidWorks 24, 23, 25, etc. The bare bones of the software is usually the same. In this mini-series, learn SolidWorks from scratch. And we started off with just opening the software like you would have installed it on your computer and generating that first part. So let's have a look through what SolidWorks is on a very basic level. So as we open our software, we have new SolidWorks document. Now we have a part document, an assembly document, or a drawing document. Part is a 3D representation of a single design component. So it is literally a part. An assembly is when you put a bunch of parts together to make an assembly or make a more complex model of a bunch of components assembled. And then of course a drawing is to make a 2D drawing or a manufacturing drawing of either a part or assembly. Now the interesting thing about SolidWorks is if I generate a part file and make it into my assembly and then generate a drawing or a manufacturing drawing from my assembly file, if I decide to change something in my part file, it will change in my assembly file and change in my drawing file. So the beauty of SolidWorks is that the three file types are interconnected. If you modify one, it will follow to the next file type. That becomes very, very handy for if you have just simple changes, even fairly major changes, it can still filter through. Like we're talking dimensions, angles, equations, all those types of modifications can be seen in the next file. That saves us from having to go back and individually change multiple small files. Makes the workflow much faster. Now, as I said, we're starting on with our part, but down here we also have advanced. Now, advanced, if we clicked, we would have options of different templates. But as we are in a novice, starting a new SolidWorks document, we still have a template here, or our base template that we can use. We also would have an assembly template and a drawing template. So on my part, I'm going to click OK. The software will load up. It can take a few minutes. Now, just to say where we're looking at as well, and it's always important to point out, especially if you're new to the software. Now, some people will know me from teaching courses that they have been on, and other people mightn't have met me yet. But these are the basics that I show through all my courses of what is where. So the first thing we're looking at, our software is SolidWorks 2024. Now, there is 2025 out now, and there's 2023, 2022. It goes back, I think, as far as 2006 or 2008, different versions of the software. In the, in the normal everyday running of the software, very little changes, or there's not major advancements when each iteration or each edition of the software comes out. There's also a banner down here that says SolidWorks Premium 2024 SP 3.1. So that tells you I'm using the SolidWorks Premium Edition. I have the 2024 edition and my service pack is 3.1. Now, if you're a registered user of SolidWorks, you can download new service packs every time they come out. The SolidWorks Premium, there's different versions of SolidWorks that you use. What we're using here now is the desktop version. The different versions of SolidWorks are SolidWorks Standard, SolidWorks Professional, and SolidWorks Premium. Premium being the highest version. There's different features given with each different version. So just to be aware. What we look at with this course can be used through any version of the software. It doesn't have to be a premium or a professional version. It can be used with any one of the three. So that's the first important thing I will point out, that it's always good to know what software you're using, and especially SP version as well. So SP stands for service packs. So there's 5 service packs if I'm correct. The software usually comes out around November and that's released with Service Pack 0. And then the following November, the following August, I think it is, it comes out as Service Pack 5. So there is different downloadable service packs. In the overall essence of it, here is our part. If I open my part, you can see I have a few different menus, some different tools. We have some tabs here, and we also have our design feature manager down here. We have our unit system. Sorry, I'm also using a mouse highlighter just so that you can follow along easily. Next thing that people often ask is how do we change our units? Well, changing the units on the software is quite easy. We have down here MMGS. If I click on my MMGS, I'm given 4 options. I have my MKS, meter, kilometer, second, centimeter, gram, second, millimeter, gram, second, and IPS for inch, pound, second. So there is different versions of the actual unit system that we can just select very easily. Otherwise, we can actually change the full standard that the program is running. So if I want to change my drawing standard, I can move up to my options icon here and click. When my options loads, you can see I have my options as in general options. And under my general options, I have 2 tabs. I have system options and I have document properties. What we are looking for is our document properties. If I click my document properties, we have the overall drafting standard of ISO. So we can change that ISO. We have DIN, we have GB, we have lots of different standards here that we can select. So I'm actually going to leave it on my ISO selection. Also, we can change our units by using our units tab here. If I click on my units, you can see I have my MKS, my CGS, my MMS, my IPS, and my custom once again. We can investigate different options and different selections at a later stage. But we do want to get back to what we were laying out as our initial model. So I'm going to click OK there. In our understanding of the screen we are looking at, well, the first thing is we have a quick access toolbar. So that's where this SolidWorks label is. I have my file, edit, view, insert, tools, and window. That's fair enough. I also have this guy, and this guy is the thumbtack. So if I want that menu to stick in place, which I do because I use it quite often, I can just click on the thumbtack. If I want that menu to disappear, click on the thumbtack again, and you can see I have to go out to the fly out arrow for it to come back. So that's just one simple thing that can confuse. Now, the next thing is I have a menu option. I have Welcome to SolidWorks, New, Open, Save, Print, Undo and Redo. I have my selections. I have my Rebuild, and we'll come back to Rebuild. I have File Properties. We can come back to that. My options, and I have another few over here, including a search bar and logins, etc. So these are my top menu. Then we have our tools. And as you can see, a lot of the tools are grayed out. Well, if the tools are grayed out, it means that we cannot access those tools at this exact moment. We have to do something else with our actual file before we can access those tools. Over here, I have some reference geometry. And when I click down, I have things like planes, axis, coordinate system, and options like that. I have some stuff to do with curves here as well. And you mightn't have, but I do, is there's lots of grayed out options here as well. Under my features, or beside my features I should say, I have a sketch tab. If I click my sketch tab, you can see I have far less grayed out options. So these are options that I can use straight away. And they're pretty much to sketch that initial 2D sketch to start my design. I also have my smart dimensions, which means I can put in my measurements on my dimensions. In this version of the software, I also have access to sheet metal. So instead of drawing a sketch to make a 3D model, I can actually draw a sketch and make it straight into metal. So, sheet metal unfold, etc. So I have that option clicked on here. I also have my weldments. So my weldments options are clicked as well. Another very important tab is my evaluate. And when I click my evaluate, that gives me options like interference detection. It also provides me with measure. A measure is one of the main commands that I use within the software. It is the very same as a regular measuring tape. Measure the distance between 2 points, etc. Very handy command. Also, I have something that is grayed out here at the moment, and it's called mask properties. So mask properties is very effective for telling me the weights of things, the size of things, the volumes of items. So we can come back to that. And there's other options grayed out here, and there's other options that are live that we can use. So we can come back to some of these. My SolidWorks Visualize is where I can export it out to a program called SolidWorks Visualize, otherwise a rendering program that'll allow me to put colors and effects, etc. on the actual image. Now, for certain installs of the software, there might be different tabs. So let's work that one out first. How do I turn on and off different tabs that I want to see? So for instance, I want to turn off my sheet metal tab. Well, if I right click on my tab, I have enabled command manager, which is actually the whole box of tools. I'll turn off that. I have large buttons with text. Fair enough, large buttons with text. But down here, I have my tabs. And as you can see, I have lots of different tabs I can select and unselect. And these will give me different options for different sets of tools that fall in under those individual tabs. For instance, I am looking to take off my sheet metal tab. If I click, my sheet metal tab disappears. Right click again, tabs, and I'm going to turn off my weldments as well. Okay, the main ones that I actually want is my sketch, my features, and my evaluate, because they're the main tabs that I'm going to use when building solid models. I want to take off my visualize, right click, tabs, Microsoft Visualize, and I can take off my visualize. Just to have a quick look at those tabs, we have features, sketch, we have sketch ink, surfaces, sheet metals, structure system, weldments, mold tools, mesh modeling, data migration, direct editing, markup, evaluate, SolidWorks Visualize, MBD dimensions, rendering tools, SolidWorks add-ins, SolidWorks CAM, SolidWorks CAM TBM, and analysis preparation. As you can imagine, each one of them has a separate toolbar belonging to that feature. Now, on our toolbars itself, if we go over to our toolbars tab here, we can see we have lots and lots of different toolbars. So they are a separate item that you can pick up, and we'll talk about them at a later stage. If I click my customize, you can see it'll allow me into options to select my different toolbars, and I think there's one for tabs there as well. It also allows me to check or change my icon size, give me large tooltips. Tooltips is when you highlight over and you can see, as is shown there, some text will appear, adds one or more domes. That is a tooltip. So you have also got an in context bar and quick access menu. Then we have shortcut bars and keys, different commands. If any command you are looking for within the full remit of the software can be picked up in this command tab. Very handy if you can't find the actual command you're looking for. We have lots of different menus, keyboard shortcuts, and then of course mouse gestures. So there's lots of different bits and pieces there we can explore later on. That gives me to the point that I have my 3 tabs that I really need. So those main 3 tabs are the feature, the sketch, and the evaluate tab. Well, if we travel down that little bit more, we can see we're on our feature manager design tree. Across my feature manager design tree, there are also tabs. First one is the feature manager design tree. The second one is the property manager. The third one is the configuration manager. Then we have the dim expert manager. We have an appearance manager. We have a CAM feature tree, a CAM operation tree, and what's the last one? CAM tools tree. So you can see that there's different property managers here, or feature managers. The one that we would use the most is our feature manager design tree. So we're going to leave it on that tab. The next item down is there's an actual filter here. And I'm going to go back over that filter when we go more into our model. Below that, there's a part 1. So that part 1 is actually the file name. Part 1 is the generic name given to a file as your first file you save on SolidWorks. Now, there is an issue with part 1. If you generate another file, it's going to be called part 2. If you generate another file, it's going to be called part 3. You can imagine that some assemblies in the software have multiple parts. So if you said part 1, part 2, part 3, if there was 10 parts in an assembly, or joined together like Lego, well then we're not too bad. We'd know part 1, part 2, part 3. But you can imagine if that was 10,000 parts joined together in a model. And often on big machines there would be that kind of quantity of parts. Well, then part 1, part 2, part 3 doesn't really work for us. We have to find a system of naming our parts so that they can be easily identified, or that the version of that part can be identified. So often then we change to things like a numbering system or a parts identifier system, etc. But as we start out, maybe instead of naming them part 1, part 2, part 3, say bottom plate, top plate, side plate, just give it some version of a generic name, but something that stands out to you. Now, under our part name, we have default because it is a default part. We have a history box, we have sensors, we can go through the two of them. We have annotations, we can go through that. We have a material selection box. So material selection, we can make a model of any material that's in the SolidWorks library, and we can add customized materials if we can't find it in the library. So if I was to right click, you see I have some favorited materials here of plain carbon, cast alloy. There's lots of favorites here. And if I wanted to create something in brass and then recreate it in copper, it's only a matter of a click of a button. But if I go up to my edit materials, you can see my edit material box comes up, and these are all the materials that I can select for my edit materials. So we have irons, we have alloys, etc. the whole way down. If I click on any material, you can see that it gives me the scientific calculation of that material for elastic modules, Poisson's ratio, mass density, etc. So this is a full library and database of those materials. For the moment, I'm not too concerned, so I'm not even going to apply a material. The next thing I see, I have a front plane, I have a top plane, and I have a right plane. Now, before I go any further, I have a 3-button mouse here. So I have a button on the left, a button on the right, and a center scroll. So if I use my center scroll, I can bring my model in and out with a zoom. Tell you what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to turn on my planes. So I have my planes on. I'm going to press my spacebar on my keyboard, and I'm going to come down and say isometric. And now we can see where our top plane, our right plane, and our front plane are. So it's only the selection of planes that you can start your model from. In the origin, I have 1 point. This is my origin point. My origin point is the only point that the computer knows where it is. So what is a plane? A plane is an infinite space that you can start a drawing from. So the front plane, the top plane, and the right plane. If I was to look at an object, and I put that object in under me, and I look directly down on top of the object, we'd be looking at the front plane. If I looked at the front of the object directly, I'd be looking at the front plane. And if I looked at the end of the object, I'd be looking at the right plane. Now, there are planes. There are spaces that you can develop the object in. So I'm going to draw a box, and we'll see what those different spaces are and those different planes are. The origin, as I said, is the only point that the computer knows where it is. The origin coordinates 0, 0, 0. Now, if we go back to my isometric tilts the object I'm going to draw at a 3/4 view or an isometric view so that I can actually see the object in 3D form. Down here, we have our X, Y, and Z. Now, for those that have used CAD/CAM softwares before, will know about the X, Y, and Z. We can explain these once we have a model together. Traveling down our lower bar, we have the SolidWorks Premium, so that's the title of the software you're using and the version. We have our units over here. I'm not concerned with this little tag. And then we have another set of toolbars over here. We're not concerned with them at the moment. On the top of our file, we have our close and we have our minimize. And then we have our zoom to fit, our zoom to area, the previous view, cross section, etc. So there's a few options there. Now what I'm going to do first is I'm going to draw a basic part. So I do have an exercise there I want to do, but we'll start off with our basic part first. I want to create something that is 3D. If I click on my front plane and I click sketch. Now, the front plane turns 90 degrees to me. If I want to turn off my visual of my planes, I can right click, hide. So if you have an eyeball, it is to view, so you're seeing the outline of the plane. If you have the strike through the eyeball, it's hiding. So click. See the way my plane disappears? It doesn't actually disappear. It just goes away visually. Sometimes it's easier to understand. Now, where am I? There's my front plane. Am I stuck with the size of that orange rectangle? No, I can travel outside that orange rectangle and still be within my plane. So if I click and draw a square. So I'm going to start at this point, and it's very important we know where to start. If I start at this point, I'm starting at 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So, I am starting at a point the computer knows where it is. If I was to start out just randomly, the computer does not know where that original point is. The whole purpose of the software, it's a mathematical software. How is the software mathematical if it's visual? As we draw visually, it is using each point as a mathematical node of where that point is. If I click and draw a line from a point anywhere, and the computer knows where that point is, and I tell it the distance, length, and angle to the end of the line, it'll know where the other point is. So it'll know where 2 points is. And if you were to draw a multiple shape, then as long as you keep the computer fed with information, it's able to see where those points will sit. For instance, click, click, click. And you can see as I'm clicking, those lines are being built. This brings me to another few things. Right here at the moment, I have, if I drop down on my eyeball here, I have this box ticked. And this box says View Sketch Relations. Control the visibility of sketch relations. Well, I want to see what my visible sketch relations are, so I'm going to leave that guy on. And I have a mistake here, so I'm going to use my selection, click, and just press my DELETE key. And then I'm going to go back to my line, and I'm going to start my line again. What is our relations? We have multiple green boxes on this sketch. We have a green box here where we started. We have a green box here where the line travels up. We have a green box here where the line travels over. Now, what is my first green box here? My first green box is called a coincident relation. It's telling me that the line is stuck to that red point. That red point is actually called our origin. And our origin is the one place the computer knows where it is. So that origin is 0, 0, 0. So the computer is starting off there. What is this saying? It is saying to me, my second one is that it's a vertical line. My line started here and it's traveling in the vertical direction. My line is black. this line on the top is blue, and I know there's yellow lines there as well. Those yellow lines are for guides. We come back to them. On the top of my black line is a blue line, and actually on top of that blue line is another green relation. If a relation is green, it is active. So that relation is telling me I have an active horizontal line. So that gives me a second idea. It's a line on top that's horizontal. Why is the horizontal line blue while the vertical line is black? The issue there is the computer, even though it knows the line is vertical, it does not know what distance the line is away from our origin point, our 0, 0 point. So we have to fill that in. And when we tell it what distance it is, then our blue line on top should turn black. Then the next point we'd have to do is tell the computer what the next blue line is and where it is. And eventually all our lines turn black. When our lines turn black, we know that that shape is constrained. Otherwise, it's locked in place. It cannot move out of place. Why do we need strained or constrained shapes? We need those constrained shapes for our object not to move about when we're modifying other things. One peeve that you would often get with SolidWorks, especially if people send you files, etc., is that some of it can be underdefined. The problem with underdefinition, if you modify something else on the file, you could possibly move something that you weren't expecting to move on the file. It might be only moving 1/4 millimeter, you will never notice. And then when that piece goes to actual manufacture, that's where the issue starts. Things might become out of line, etc. What we would do is we'd fully define and lock in all our sketches. And once they're fully defined, once they're locked in, we then know, okay, well, this is perfect. It cannot move on us. We have confidence in what we're building. If I look at my pointer, now I do realize I have a highlighter on this cursor, but you can see that I have 61.76. So that 61.76 is actually a length or a distance. So that 61.76 means the line I have started on the top and traveled down is 61.76 long. It is not the measurement that I require. It is only previewing or telling me a measurement that the line possibly is. It also has 90 degrees. Well, if we had something that was horizontal and then we went at 90 degrees to that horizontal, we would have vertical. So otherwise, it is telling me from the horizontal line back to the origin, it is going vertical. And we can see that in under that 61.76 and the 90, we can see that vertical yellow and a horizontal white. What's the difference between the yellow, the white, and the green? The green relation is active. Yellow relation will be active as soon as you click. And the white relation is not active. It's only telling you, or it's not going to be active either. It's only telling you that the relation could exist. If I click and travel back and click again, now we have a square. That's making a square from a normal set of lines. In our actual sketch, we have other options. We have a rectangle here where we can create this with a few clicks. We have lots of different versions of rectangle that we can use as well. So we'll have a look at them in later episodes. Now we have our square. We have 3 blue lines, 1 black line. But I'm after clicking my mouse and starting a new line. I don't need that new line. I don't want that new line there. How do I get rid of it? If I press my escape key, I can get rid of that line. If I click on the line itself, highlighting it in that light blue, and then press delete, it'll undo it for me as well. But my sketch is still open and active. As you can see, my 2 blue lines are there. How do I know my sketch is still active? Is if I go back down to my feature manager design tree, you can see I have a traffic light. I have, well, what we call a traffic light, a red and green light. I have a non-grayed out sketch. Over on this side, you can see I have a button here that is exit sketch, and I also have a discard changes button. My sketch is still quite active. The next thing I want to do before I create the box is I want to take my smart dimension, and I have to put in some measurements. If I go over and click my smart dimension, it would bring me directly into smart dimension. But if I click down, you can see I have lots of different versions of dimensions that I can add. The smart dimension will allow me to select 2 lines or 2 points, and it will pick which is the most appropriate dimension type for that object. The smart dimension saves us from having to select these. If you wanted to override, or if you're doing something specific, you can always change to one of these other dimensioning methods. Pretty much to dimension, we just need our numbers and our actual sizes on the object. Smart dimension, click. Now you can see it's highlighted. My cursor will change and it'll give me 2 little lines with 2 little arrows and a line in between. I'm going to pick this black line here. And as I travel over the line, you can see a few little things happen. Actually, one major little thing happens. You can see that I get a yellow dot in between the black line. And what that yellow dot is, that is the midpoint of that line, or the dead center of that line. If I click on the line and drag out, you can see I have 61.76. Now I haven't clicked anything else. I just clicked once and click down and let go of my click, and you can see the line is attached to the mouse. If you remember, on the left hand side there was a set of numbers that was beside our cursor at the bottom of the line, and 90 was beside that, and then we had a yellow vertical and a white horizontal. Well, that number was 61.76. Our line has actually set itself to 61.76. We don't want 61.76, we want, say, 75. So if I click it once again, it locks in and it says there's a modify box here. In our modify box, we have save the current value and exit. We have restored original value. Once again, we have our traffic light. Our traffic light, or as it's nicknamed, a traffic light, is a red and green light. What it means is that you need to rebuild your model, or you need to update the parameters that you've given the software so it can do its calculations in the background. It says regenerate the model with its current value. That's really what we're doing. And the more complex sketches, the more complex features that we tend to do, the more there is to regenerate. As you can see, that appears here. We can also use Control B and Control Q. And they're all different versions of regenerate the measurements that's in the model. I'm going to say 75. Down here we can select different units, etc. But I'm just saying 75 of the unit. And what units are we using at present moment? As you can see, mmgs, millimeter, gram and second. So I know that that is then 75 millimeters. Just in another note there, that D1 at sketch 1. Well, D1 stands for distance 1. Sketch 1 is the sketch that we've opened. So this is sketch 1. It's sketch number 1 of this model. This becomes important later on as we go looking at things like equations, global variables. If I click OK, my model now changes and it's 75. What else has changed? Something else has changed in our actual graphic area. We can see that our black line, and now we have another black line where there was a blue. If I travel down here, we can see that we're still underdefined. So underdefined means that the computer does not know where one of those points is. If it was fully defined, the computer knows where every point is. So what we want to do is we want to make a fully defined sketch. And no matter what we're sketching, we want to try and make it fully defined. We can add and take material away from sketches that are not fully defined, but you run risks. The risk is that the sketch will move and you lose vital or important or precise information. If you are sending something to manufacture, it is stressful enough to know that you have done everything correct and it gets manufactured correct. But if you're second guessing things like manufacturing drawings or models, etc., that just piles on a lot more stress than needs to be. So before I ever send out any kind of models or anything to be manufactured, I would always make sure that they are fully defined, regardless. Now, there is exceptions to the rule, and we can talk about them later as well. What happens when the sketch is underdefined? And this is what I am highlighting so much about the full definition for. If I take my cursor here and I click my blue line, click and hold, I can drag back and forth my blue line. Otherwise, I can move the size of the box. Well, you can imagine if you had a very precise drawing and you're doing some little piece of it and you touch that line and it moved back 1/4 millimeter. Then it gets cut out or whatever else or however else it's manufactured and it's 1/4 millimeter out and you're thinking, oh well, 1/4 millimeter isn't that much. 1/4 millimeter isn't that much in some versions of industry. In other versions of industry that can be a mile out. In the center of an engine somewhere, that 1/4 millimeter would stop things from fitting. So you can understand the importance of being precise in this. If I go to my smart dimension again, click, keep an eye on this blue line, click, and I'm not going to keep this as a rectangle. I'm going to say this is 100, or as a square, I'm going to keep this as 100. You can see now something else has happened. My blue line has turned black. What else on our screen has changed? Except down here, it says fully defined. What does fully defined mean? Fully defined means that I can click anywhere on this sketch and I cannot move this line. Yeah, that line has turned blue, but they're only highlighting blue. Otherwise, they're not being able to be pulled or moved. They're only blue because they get highlighted. How do I go back if I have made a mistake? How do I undo one of those mistakes? Or how do I take and change a measurement? So I know we haven't even got to add material yet, but the basis of adding the material is actually the simple piece of the model. The sketch is quite often the most complicated piece of the model. If I take my 100 and I double click my 100, my modify box comes back up. And that is a way that I can say, well, instead of 100, I want 75. When I click or put in my 75, I can click my value here. It's only one way. I can also press my enter key. Not my return, my enter. And now we have a 75 by 75 square. If I didn't double click on a measurement and I only clicked once, I can change my measurement down here as well. This is my feature property design tray or feature manager design tray, but as you can see, it's not highlighted. My property manager is the one that is highlighted. So my property manager allows me to change values related to my dimension. And we can have a look at this later on again and really look in depth at it. If I double click, my modify box comes up. There is different ways of changing and modifying dimensions for speed and accuracy. So we can have a look at them. Say if I was working away and I had put in the wrong relation. Well, I need to delete a relation or maybe reattach a relation somewhere. Well, if I click on the relation, see the green button itself or the green box? click, it now turns blue. So it just means that's highlighted. If I press my DELETE key, the line turns blue. Well, how does the line turn blue if the computer knows it's 75 from that line to that line? This is another thing that can catch people out. It's 75 from the end of the line to the end of the line. Because my relation has gone from my vertical, doesn't mean to say that this lower line is 75 like that upper line. So there is lots of different ways that we can manipulate pieces of drawings without having to change dimensions. A lot of those ways is things like relations. What else can I do with my relations? I have my horizontal and vertical. Well, if I wanted to apply a new relation to my lines, if I hold down my sketch button, my shift, left shift, click my line, and here is my relations that I can add. So I can add that the two lines would be horizontal. Well, that's not going to really be effective for me because it would mean that this line is horizontal and this line is horizontal. Probably cause an error rather than anything good. I have vertical. Yeah, it's not really going to work because I don't want the two vertical either. Wait, what's this highlighted here in bold? It's perpendicular. Well, wouldn't that work for me? My line here and my line there, perpendicular. Well, if I had a perpendicular line, it'd give me my 90-degree corner, which would be the equivalent of having a vertical and a horizontal line joining. So I'm going to click my perpendicular. Then I'm going to click OK on my properties or press my enter. We still have a fully defined box. So we know that the 75 is the horizontal and the 75 is the vertical. We know that the box is square. Even if I was to measure corner to corner, it would still be square. If I go to my Evaluate tab and my measure, I'm given something else here. This is literally a measuring tape. If I click on this point and click on this point, it'll tell me my measurement distance is 106. It'll give me my delta X and Y as 75. It will tell you if the object is square. Click, click, 106. So you can see I have an actual square object there. Now, where it's coming in with my delta X and Y. This is my starting point. So this is my origin right here, that dot. Well, as my triad here goes, my Y is facing up. My X positive is facing this direction. So I'm actually in the X negative here. The Z is the direction that we're looking at. So we can work that out later on when we make our models or start making models. We can see what way those directions work. Okay, I'm going to add some material here. I'm going to hit my traffic light to rebuild, or you can see it says it's Control and B, or if you want to master one, it's Control and Q. Click, and next my sketch goes grey. See the buttons here have disappeared? So I have no X and I have no back button. Well, that means that I have exited my sketch. Now my sketch is sitting right here. I also have no little arrows or symbols in here. If my sketch was underdefined, it actually says underdefined here with a little minus sign in brackets. So we'll see that later on and I'll highlight that later on as well. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say Features and I'm going to click this one. We can see in our Features tab, we have some features there. We have an extruded boss base, we have a revolved boss base, we have a sweep, a loft and a bound. This is all for adding material. We can add material in different ways. The next set divided by this line is taking away material. We can use extruded cut, the hole wizard, the revolve cut, sweep cut, loft cut, bound cut. So the section over here is for adding material. The section here is for taking away material. And this section here is mixed. So some of it might add material, some of it might take material. Why is my material, the section for taking away material, grey? It is grey because there's no material to take away. What we want to do is change that around. We want to add material and then take material. So let's just add material first. I'm going to go with my extruded boss base and I'm going to click. It's giving me a problem. It's saying select a plane on which to sketch the feature cross section or selecting an existing sketch for use. Well, didn't we sketch this? So I want to put my material on this one. If I click, it selects the box and now it gives me a preview. And you can see the preview says it's 10 millimeters and it's the yellow. And I've added material to that square. There's lots of different options here. We can go from, which is different surfaces and offsets, etc., that we can put material in different ways. We also have a direction, which is up the surface, up the vertex, blind, up the body, mid-plane. There's lots of different places there that we can add material, or ways we can add material. If I travel down, we have the thickness of the material we want to add. Next box down would be something like a draft. So turning on and off draft. Otherwise, if you wanted a draft for a mold, that you can put it in degrees on either side. We have direction 2, so we don't have to just put material one way, we could go the opposite way. And if I click on direction 2, you can see that it adds material at the back. And we can increase material size from one side compared to the other if required. I also have a thin feature. If I click my thin feature, I'm just putting a thickness of material on the outside or inside of my shape. Otherwise, I don't have to fill the whole shape with material. So as you can see, we have lots and lots of different options. And that's what can make modeling either complicated or simplified. Those different options that you select can make a complex model. Or if you have a good idea or layout of how to create the model, you can make a very complex model quite simply. My contour select, if we had multiple contours, otherwise multiple drawings or areas within a drawing, we can use our contour select to select which one we want. So otherwise, if you had 2 or 3 areas within a drawing and you only want to put material in one of them, or 2 of them. So if I use my boss extrude and click OK, here is my 3D shape. If I hold down a center mouse button, the scroll wheel, I can zoom in and out. What I have done, I've clicked down my center scroll wheel, and once it clicks in, you can move around your model. So give yourself a 3D view. Other bits and pieces that I would add would be my material. So I can right click and I can say 1060 Li. The appearance didn't change that much. Copper set. See, now I have material that isn't copper. Now it's in a standard graphics view. It is not a rendered image. When I go back to my evaluate, my mask properties, so I click on my evaluate tab with my left and click my mask properties, you can see now I actually have a weight as well. So that's the greatest thing that you see with the software, is it can pick up weights. It can tell you how much material is in something. To finish up then, I just want to save my part. If I go to File, I have lots of different options here, but if I travel down to Save As, click, you can see it brings up a previous part. Well, instead of part 1, I'm going to call this exercise 1, and we'll call it block. We're saved now as a SolidWorks part file, and we can just click save. And that is the first exercise, looking at this software and being able to create a 3D shape within the context of the software. Join me again for another one. Please like and share, subscribe. Thank you everyone.